Hey everybody, this is the first episode of Purkey Horror Picture Show. Today's episode is The Day the Earth Stood Still from 1951. Quick background, so why am I doing this in the first place? I was thinking back about the first time I saw a Rocky Horror Picture Show, and at that time it had been around for a while. I didn't go to the early midnight screenings, although I had been to a few midnight screenings of movies. I never did originally when Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of blew up. So when I finally went to it, I kind of knew what to expect, and I knew about it being like, everyone dressed up, and everyone threw stuff, and everyone went crazy, and all the stuff about kind of being accepting of all the more non-traditional sexual roles, and how that had a big impact on kind of the freaks and geeks of the world having something that they could watch. So anyway, when I went and saw it, I was kind of looking at it for that aspect and the participation aspect, but then right at the beginning, science fiction double feature, the song came on, and immediately I felt like, oh, I'm at home here because I have seen a lot of these movies without even seeing this movie. A lot of these old B sci-fi movies and horror movies just gave me nostalgia because as a kid, I would always, stay up late. I'd watch I want to say it was called maybe Night Owl Theater. That was one of the things that used to come on, and it was always on like your alternate channels, the ones that would play, all day long, be playing the Munsters and Brady Bunch and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, I would stay up late and watch horror movies or sci-fi movies, really B movies on that show, the Owl Theater. Or the other one I'd see would be like on a Saturday afternoon, I'd watch like the Creature Feature movie, which was the same sort of thing. And both of those were a huge impact for me as far as just being into like all kinds of weird cult cinema and B movies, horror movies, sci-fi movies, all that kind of stuff.
Can you feature that awful creature? Can you feature that ugly creature? Creature features and feature features about creatures.
So anyway, we're going to be going through all of the movies mentioned in Science Fiction Double Feature. And the first lines are,
Michael Rennie was there the day the earth stood still.
Well, The Day the Earth Stood Still is from 1951, and it is starring Michael Rennie as Klaatu. He is an alien that lands on Earth in a stereotypical silver spaceship. It lands in a baseball diamond in Washington, D.C., and the whole world is stunned as an alien and his giant robot, Gort, which is this hilariously foam, it's supposed to be metal, but it's just this foam giant robot that comes out and stands there. It can open its visor and it can shoot a ray gun out. Anyway, The Day the Earth Stood Still is one of the very first serious sci-fi movies ever made, in that it wasn't a bunch of monsters and bugs, and it actually tried to tackle some of the more serious social themes of the time. Now, obviously, 1951, there's going to be a bit stereotypical in some of the presentations, the way they present, politics and the military and all that stuff is fairly conservative. But there is an aspect to this movie that's kind of unusual. First of all, it is very peace-oriented. This is around the time I think that the United Nations was really getting going. It was after World War II. People still had that memory of war, and the Korean War and all that stuff was kind of starting to heat up at that point, if I remember correctly. So this is a movie that's kind of often compared to as a Christ metaphor, following the path of Klaatu as kind of a Christ figure. But surprisingly, it's a very non-religious movie. For that time, its emphasis is on peace and on knowledge being the keys. So in that aspect, it's very refreshing and very unusual. Even for sci-fi these days, it's pretty unusual. You don't get a lot of movies these days that are about that or kind of emphasize that in the sci-fi realm. A couple things to note about this movie. I'm not going to go through all the details, except that he comes down, he comes out, he says, "I come here in peace," and the first thing they do is they shoot him. which is a very American reaction, and I think that still works today. And the middle portion of the movie is a lot of his adventures on Earth, kind of not even adventures, I would say, more like getting out there to kind of understand American society. And then eventually he has a message for Earth, and there's an interaction with a scientist that's very Einstein-like, and the various ways that progresses. I'm not going to give you all the details. It's definitely not an action-packed movie, but if you're into older sci-fi or like those old sci-fi B movies, it's beautifully shot. It's very high quality for its era, and sets a lot of the standards for that time. A couple really notable things. It was directed by Robert Wise, one of his earlier movies, and Robert Wise went on to great fame and great acclaim later as the director of West Side Story and The Sound of Music. So he early on made this. He also made one of my favorite movies of all time, another genre movie, and that is The Haunting. So Robert Wise is an older director that really had some great movies. Another very notable element of this movie is the soundtrack is done by none other than Bernard Herrmann. Now, you probably all know him, if you're into movies, as the composer of the score for Psycho, as well as a whole bunch of Hitchcock movies. Also, Taxi Driver. And this movie is very theremin strong. In fact, it's probably pretty much the template for a lot of sci-fi scores to come. I don't believe before this that there was much sci-fi that had that theremin that... I don't know. You know the sound. If you want to really get a feel for what it sounds like other than just going and watching the movie, go and watch Mars Attacks. I think Mars Attacks is in some ways parodying this movie. Finally, one other little piece of trivia. If you're into other horror movies or other B movies, there is a big nod to this movie in Army of Darkness, the third Evil Dead movie. A big part of that movie is him having to say the phrase Klaatu Barada Necto, which comes directly from The Day the Earth Stood Still. I would rate this about a 4-star out of 5 movie for me. I think modern audiences might have a hard time getting through it. It's a little bit slow for them. Maybe they'd give it about 3 stars. But if you're into classic sci-fi, classic old B movies, or Universal horror, all that era, or any of the 50s sci-fi, you pretty much have to see The Day the Earth Stood Still. Our next movie to come up is going to be the original Invisible Man, Universal monster, one of the main ones, starring Claude Rains. Probably get that viewed by the 4th or 5th and reviewed about the same time. So go ahead and watch it ahead of time if you'd like to see it. All right, checking out from Purkey Horror Picture Show Episode 1.